Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. I left my apartment early that morning, coat zipped, scarf tucked, the city still yawning into wakefulness. It was my habit. Get ahead of the rush, arrive before the lights were fully on, sip my coffee at my desk as the office slowly came to life. I'd never been late. Not once in 7 years. The air was crisp, my boots tapping a steady rhythm along the pavement. I turned down 7th, less than 3 blocks from Nextbridge Analytics when it happened. A silver sedan ran the light. I barely saw it, just a flash of chrome and the shriek of brakes. The bumper clipped the edge of my coat, spinning me off balance. My tote flew out of my hand, scattering papers and pens across the sidewalk. I landed hard, knees scraping the concrete. It was fast, jarring, but not serious. The driver leapt out, stammering apologies. People gathered. Someone called 911. A woman pressed a water bottle into my hand. "I'm okay," I insisted, voice shaking. "Really, just..." Startled. The EMTs arrived in minutes. No serious injuries, just minor scrapes and a very rattled heartbeat. They offered to take me to the hospital. I declined. I have to get to work. By the time I limped through the revolving glass doors of the building, it was 9:05 a.m. The elevator ride to the 19th floor was the longest 60 seconds of my life. I tried to smooth my hair in the reflective panels, blot the smudge of mascara from under my eye, and breathe through the adrenaline still pumping in my veins. When the doors opened, I stepped out onto familiar gray carpet and the low hum of computers already waking up. A few coworkers glanced up. No one said anything. My boss's door, Michael Grant's door, was still closed. Relief washed over me so suddenly I nearly sagged against the wall. I slipped past the kitchenette, headed for my desk, and eased into my chair with as much composure as I could muster. Safe. For now. But my hands still shook as I reached for my mouse. The morning's near disaster played on a loop in my head. The crosswalk, the car, the sound of my own breath catching in my throat. I looked at the screen, but the numbers didn't register. All I could think about was how quickly it could have ended. How absurd it was that after all these years of showing up early, staying late, never taking sick days, one random moment in traffic nearly ruined everything. And Michael wouldn't have cared. Not really. If I'd limped in at 9:30 with a doctor's note and a bleeding knee, he still would have seen it as a failure in discipline. That was his style, precision over people, structure over sense. But he didn't see me today. He didn't know I was late. He didn't know how close he came to making the worst mistake of his career. Because if he had fired me, then and there, over 5 minutes, well, what he didn't know is that everything he depended on, the client dashboards, the onboarding sequences, the internal performance tools, those weren't part of the original company package. They were mine. Built in the shadows, improved during sleepless nights, refined until they were seamless. And what he never noticed was that I never signed them over. Not fully. So I sat there, hands trembling on the keyboard, and knew something had shifted. I hadn't been fired. Not yet. But something was coming. I just didn't know then whether it would be my downfall or his. I had just started to catch my breath. The screen in front of me glowed softly with numbers I couldn't focus on, while the coffee in my hand, finally retrieved from the kitchenette, sat untouched, cooling fast. The adrenaline from the near miss at the crosswalk was still coursing through me, like a storm trapped under my skin. 9:11 a.m. I checked it 3 times, hoping somehow I'd misread it, that it still wasn't enough to cause suspicion. Michael's door opened. He stepped out like a shadow, dark suit, pressed collar, tie knotted with corporate cruelty. His gaze swept across the room once, then landed on me, and stayed. Rose, my office. Now. The words froze the room. Eyes ducked. Mouse clicks stopped. I stood slowly, forcing my legs to cooperate as I followed him down the short corridor. Inside, the blinds were already drawn. He didn't ask me to sit. He closed the door with the kind of slow finality that felt like a verdict, then turned, arms folded across his chest. "What did you think?" he said, voice like steel. "That I wouldn't find out?" I blinked. "Michael, I've put up with you for too long." he cut in, stepping closer. "Your attitude, your silence, your smug little routines. Just because you think you're irreplaceable doesn't mean you are." I stared at him, stunned. I was 5 minutes late. "For the first time?" he sneered. "Is that supposed to mean something to me? This is a professional environment, Rose, not a casual internship." "I was nearly hit by a car," I said quietly. "On the way here. I stayed to speak with EMTs. I could have gone to the hospital, but I didn't because I didn't want to be late." He waved that away like an excuse. "You should have called." "I was on the sidewalk," I snapped, the words breaking through my usual calm. "Bleeding, stunned. Forgive me for not updating my Outlook status first." He narrowed his eyes. "Don't get clever. You're done here." He moved to his desk, pulled out a thin manila folder, my personnel file, slid it across the desk like a final blow. "You're fired," he said. "Effective immediately. Get out." The silence after that was so complete, I could hear the second hand ticking from the wall clock. I didn't move. Not because I was frozen, but because inside, something clicked into place. Not panic, not fear, something colder, sharper, understanding. I wasn't just being let go. I was being discarded, punished even. Not for being late, but for being good at what I did. For building quietly, for being indispensable in ways that he'd never understood, never bothered to ask about. He thought firing me was the final blow. He had no idea it was the first move in his own undoing. I picked up my bag, looked him dead in the eye. "You're going to regret this." He gave a low, humorless laugh. "I doubt it." As I walked out, back through the rows of desks where people pretended not to watch, I didn't cry. I didn't break. But inside, something was already rising. Because what Michael didn't know, what he never thought to ask, was that I never signed over the IP for the systems he depends on. That every dashboard, every client workflow, every internal sync was mine. And now? So was the future. I don't remember leaving the building. One moment I was staring at Michael's cold, satisfied face, and the next I was in the elevator, staring at the metallic blur of my reflection. My hands were numb, still clutching my bag like it was the only thing tethering me to the ground. Outside, the city noise was too loud. I moved like a ghost through the crowd, every step mechanical, every breath shallow. The place where the car had clipped me, just under my ribs, throbbed dully now that the adrenaline had worn off. My knees still stung. My palms were scraped, my blouse still torn at the hem. No one cared. I walked the 6 blocks home in silence, trying to make sense of what had happened. Fired. For being 5 minutes late. After nearly getting hit by a car. After paramedics had checked my vitals on the sidewalk in front of a dozen witnesses. My apartment greeted me with stillness. I sat on the edge of my bed, coat still on, and stared at the floor. Time didn't move. Neither did I. I wasn't even sure what emotion was strongest. Rage, humiliation, disbelief. It all blended into a kind of stunned quiet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Michael paint me as irresponsible. Not after all the years I gave that company. I grabbed my phone and dialed the clinic near my building. "I need to see a doctor," I said. My voice cracked. "This morning, I was nearly hit by a car. Paramedics came. I just need a medical note confirming it." The receptionist was kind, her voice calm. "Can you come in within the hour?" "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'm coming now." I changed quickly, replacing my torn blouse with a clean one, then walked the 3 blocks to the clinic. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and faint coffee. I sat with my hands in my lap, staring at the scuffed floor tiles, until a nurse called my name. The doctor was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes. She listened carefully as I described what happened, the crosswalk, the silver sedan, the paramedics, the pain that was starting to bloom in my side. She examined the bruises gently, looked at the scraped palms, then made notes. "You're very lucky," she said, "and you were absolutely right to get checked. I'll write up the incident for you. If the ambulance dispatch was called in your name, we can also get that confirmation added to your file." "I need it," I said. "For work." The word tasted bitter. She nodded. "Of course, I'll include everything. The bruising, the likely shock, the potential trauma response. Do you need rest time documented? No, I said quickly, then paused. Actually, maybe, just for today. She wrote quietly for a few moments, then handed me a crisp sheet of paper with her signature at the bottom and the clinic's official stamp in the corner. It was proof. Simple, undeniable proof. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my bag like armor. Outside, the air felt colder. The sun had fully risen, casting long shadows across the buildings. I stood on the sidewalk for a while, just breathing. The world hadn't stopped. Not for my firing, not for my fear. But that was okay, because I had proof now, of the accident, of the truth. And that meant the next step, whatever it was, would be mine to choose. I wasn't going to beg to be rehired. I wasn't going to waste time pleading with people who never saw my value. No, I was going to prepare. And when I moved again, it wouldn't be small. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay awake in the half-dark, staring at the ceiling as the events replayed over and over. The screech of tires, the sting of the pavement, Michael's voice cutting like a blade through my chest. But I had proof now. The doctor's note was folded neatly in my bag, alongside a printout of the 911 call log, confirming that an ambulance had been dispatched to the corner of 7th and Mercer at exactly 8:47 a.m. My scraped palms still ached. My ribs throbbed when I bent over. I'd done everything right, or close to it. Surely, once he saw the reality, Michael would understand. He had to. I walked into the office just before 9 a.m. the next morning, heart pounding like a drum. The receptionist blinked when she saw me but said nothing. A few coworkers turned in their chairs, eyes wide, whispers crackling behind cupped hands. But I kept walking, straight to the corner office where Michael sat with his back turned, looking out over the city like a monarch at war. I knocked once. He didn't turn. Come in. I stepped in, carefully closing the door behind me. I wanted to speak with you about yesterday. He turned now, slowly, one eyebrow arched. You're not employed here, Rose. I know, I said, voice even. But you fired me because I was late. I have proof that I was in an accident. Paramedics were called. I went to the doctor. I was cleared but shaken, and I still came in. I slid the documents across his desk, heart in my throat. He picked them up, scanned them briefly, then dropped them with a sigh. Unfortunate, he said simply. I blinked. Excuse me? He looked at me like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. Accidents happen, Rose, but they're not my responsibility. You were late. For the first time, I said, barely able to keep the tremor out of my voice. In 7 years, and I was hit by a car. You don't think that matters? He gave a tight smile. What matters is consistency and consequences. You weren't on time. That's your problem, not mine. I stared at him. You fired me for being 5 minutes late, after I was nearly hospitalized, and now you're saying that's just business? I'm saying, he said, folding his hands like a judge pronouncing a sentence, that if you want to discuss severance, we can. But don't expect sympathy. You broke protocol, and frankly, if I had the authority, I'd fine you for it. You cost us productivity. That was when something in me cracked. Not loudly, not visibly. Just a quiet, seismic shift inside my chest. He wasn't going to walk it back. He wasn't going to admit he'd made a mistake. Because he didn't see one. In his eyes, I was never more than a cog, replaceable, silent, and only valuable when invisible. I stood, collected the papers from his desk, and slid them back into my bag. He didn't try to stop me, didn't even look up. I'm not coming back, I said softly. You won't have the chance to fire me again. He didn't respond. But that was fine, because I wasn't walking away defeated this time. I was walking away with my dignity, my documentation, and a plan. He wanted to fine me for 5 minutes? Let's see what he pays when everything I built starts disappearing. When I got home, I didn't cry. I thought I might. I felt like I should. But the grief had burned itself into something cleaner now, something focused. I dropped my bag by the door, changed out of my office clothes, and pulled my laptop from the shelf where it had lived untouched for the past few weeks. The medical report still sat in my inbox. the 911 log. My calendar entries, time-stamped and neatly organized. But none of that would matter if my termination was technically allowed. So I did what people like Michael never expect women like me to do. I called a lawyer. Eliza Barnes was an old classmate from undergrad. We'd shared a brutal statistics course, a bottle of cheap wine during finals week, and more importantly, a healthy respect for each other's intellect. She'd gone on to law school, and now she worked corporate contracts and labor rights in one of the most respected boutique firms in the city. "Rose?" she answered after 2 rings, voice warm but alert. "Wow, it's been a while. Everything okay?" "Not exactly," I said. "I was fired yesterday for being 5 minutes late after I was hit by a car." The silence on the other end said it all. "Jesus," she muttered finally. "Tell me everything." I did. Quickly, factually. Eliza didn't interrupt. Just took notes. "Do you still have your employment contract?" she asked when I finished. "I do," I said, already pulling the PDF from my personal drive. "I reviewed it when I first joined NextBridge. It's standard, I think." "Forward it to me." 10 minutes later, we were both reading through the same document, her with sharp legal eyes, me with a slowly growing sense of anticipation. She was the first to catch it. "Here," she said, tapping her keyboard. "Section 7.3, Termination for Cause." I scanned the paragraph. "What about it?" "It defines cause very specifically," she said. "Willful misconduct, gross negligence, violation of company policies that have been previously acknowledged in writing." "And?" "And there's no mention of punctuality policy in your onboarding packet," she said. "I'll bet you never signed anything formal outlining penalties for tardiness." "I didn't," I said. "There was a verbal expectation, sure, but nothing written. No strike system, no lateness warnings, nothing." Eliza smiled. I could hear it over the phone. "Then firing you for being late, especially for the first time, isn't just bad form. It could be considered wrongful termination under your own contract, especially if you can prove the lateness was due to an emergency." "I can," I said. "I have a doctor's note, EMT documentation, witnesses." "Then we've got leverage," she said. "It might not be a slam-dunk lawsuit, but it's enough to make a serious case, and to make NextBridge nervous." I sat back, staring at the screen. An interesting detail. That's what it was. A loophole. A flaw in Michael's arrogance. He fired me without cause, thinking he had all the power. He didn't. "I want to fight this," I said. Eliza's voice sharpened. "Good. Let's make them regret underestimating you." And just like that, the war began. I stared at the contract on my screen, Section 7.3 glowing like a beacon of hope. Eliza was already drafting a letter, sharp, professional, and laced with enough legal weight to shake any HR department. But something in me still needed to hear it from him. I needed to know if he even realized what he'd done. So I called him. I don't know what I expected. Maybe silence, maybe denial. But when Michael picked up, his voice wasn't cold. It was rattled. "Rose," he said, curt. "I thought we were done." "We were, until I read my contract," I replied. Section 7.3, Termination for Cause. There's no punctuality policy, no signed acknowledgement. I was fired unlawfully. He didn't answer right away, but I could hear the background noise, drawers opening, papers rustling. "You're grasping," he said finally. "Let it go." "I have medical proof, witnesses, time-stamped documentation. You fired me for being 5 minutes late after I was nearly hit by a car. That's not just morally disgusting, it's a legal problem." "You think you can threaten me?" he snapped. "You're nothing without this job." "I don't need to threaten you," I said calmly. "I already contacted legal counsel. You'll hear from them soon." That's when I heard it, distinct and unmistakable, the low whir of a shredder. He was destroying files. The audacity of it hit me like a second impact. Not only did he know he was wrong, he was trying to cover it up. "Are you shredding documents?" I asked, stunned. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, pulse thundering, anger seeping into every corner of my chest. Then I opened the folder on my desktop again. There was something I hadn't noticed before, a separate attachment I'd saved from the original HR onboarding packet, a second page of the employment contract. I opened it, and there it was, an appendix labeled Employee Rights and Dispute Process. It outlined internal resolution procedures, timelines for arbitration, and a clause stating that any disciplinary action must be documented in writing within 30 days of the alleged incident. Failure to do so, it said, invalidated the grounds for dismissal. I reread the line 3 times. Michael hadn't just fired me without cause. He'd done it in direct violation of the company's own dispute policy. I called Eliza back. "There's more," I said breathlessly. "There's an appendix. It outlines a required dispute process before termination can be finalized. He didn't follow any of it." "Send it to me," she said, her voice suddenly electric. "That changes everything." It did. Michael wasn't just morally wrong anymore. He was legally vulnerable, and now? Now I had proof of everything. The mistake, the cover-up, the silence that could cost him everything he thought he controlled. I couldn't stop shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the magnitude of what I'd just discovered. Eliza was already reviewing the contract appendix I'd sent her. The language was clear and damning. Nextbridge had bypassed its own rules when Michael fired me. But while she dug deeper, I decided to do the same. I opened the company's internal app, the same one we all use to log hours, manage projects, access documentation. I still had access. Apparently, in Michael's haste to cover his tracks, he'd forgotten to revoke my credentials. I navigated to my developer dashboard. There, under My Contributions, was a list of every resource, tool, and process I'd ever created. Client feedback modules, performance analytics scripts, even the proprietary onboarding workflow that had become the gold standard across our branches. Then I saw it. A tiny I next to the ownership tag on one of my systems. I clicked it. A pop-up appeared. According to company policy, any employee-developed resource not formally assigned, transferred, or remunerated upon termination remains the intellectual property of the original author. I blinked. Then I read it again. It was real. I dug further, cross-referencing creation logs, internal memos, the version history of the tools I'd built. None of it had ever been officially claimed by Nextbridge. I had never been paid bonuses or given equity for the architecture I developed. In their arrogance, they'd simply used my work without acknowledging it. And now? Now that I'd been terminated without cause and without contractually required dispute resolution, I could take it all with me. Eliza confirmed it within the hour. "They never filed a rights transfer," she said. "Everything you created belongs to you. If they continue to use it without permission, that's grounds for IP infringement." I sat back in my chair, stunned. My heart wasn't broken anymore. It was on fire. Michael had thought he was cutting off dead weight, but he'd actually pulled the plug on his own life support system. Because without my frameworks, Nextbridge's entire internal structure would stall. Productivity reports? Gone. Client onboarding? Disabled. Predictive project metrics? Deleted. All of it lived on code I wrote, under licenses I never signed away, and I had every right to reclaim it. It would be messy. It would cause panic. But it would also be just. Eliza asked, "Do you want to pursue reinstatement?" I didn't even hesitate. "No," I said. "I'm not going back." "Then what do you want to do?" I looked out the window of my apartment. The city skyline shimmered in the early dusk, every light a new possibility. "I want to walk away," I said, but not quietly. The call came just after 8 a.m. the next morning. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, the part that wanted to look him in the eye when the tower fell, told me to pick up. "Rose," Michael said, his tone shockingly warm. "I've been thinking. Yesterday, maybe I overreacted." I didn't say anything. "I didn't realize you were hurt," he continued, "that there was a medical incident. And if there was a misunderstanding with the termination policy, well, these things can be reversed." Ah, there it was. He wasn't calling because he was sorry. He was calling because he'd realized what he stood to lose. I leaned back in my chair. "You mean the systems, the code, the tools that keep Nextbridge running?" A pause. "Let's not get dramatic." "It's not drama," I said. "It's data." Michael cleared his throat. "Look, I've spoken to HR. They'll roll back the termination. You can return on Monday. Let's just consider this a reset. And what about the accusation? The way you humiliated me? The way you threatened to fine me while I was still shaken from being nearly hit by a car? That was poorly phrased, he said, with a rehearsed kind of regret. You're an important part of our team, Rose. I see that now. The words sounded sweet, but sweet things are often the most poisonous. I imagined myself walking back into that office, back to the desk where everyone had seen me get fired, back to the silence, the sideways glances, back under the rule of a man who saw loyalty as weakness and empathy as a flaw. No. I'm not coming back, I said. There was a beat of silence. Then, the shift. You know, he said slowly, if you walk away with those systems, it'll reflect poorly on you. Clients talk. You wouldn't want your name associated with sabotage, would you? My blood turned cold. There it was, the threat. If you think I won't tell our partners how you reacted, how you tried to weaponize your departure, you're underestimating how small this industry really is. I let the silence hang. Then I smiled. I'm counting on it being small, I said. Easier for the truth to spread. You're being emotional, he snapped. No, Michael, I said, voice even. I'm being strategic. You fired me unlawfully, attempted to cover it up, and now you're trying to manipulate me into staying by threatening my reputation. That's not leadership. That's desperation. I can fix this, he said, suddenly softer. Let's talk. Let's have lunch. We can renegotiate your position. You could have a promotion, more responsibility. You've earned that, haven't you? And that's when I realized what this really was. He wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to save himself, because without me, the machine stops, and now he knew it. But he was too late. You're not offering me an opportunity, I said. You're offering me a leash. Then I hung up and blocked his number. For the first time since this all began, I was afraid. Not angry, not righteous, just scared. It hit me like a slow leak. A chill that seeped into my bones the morning after I hung up on Michael. I kept glancing over my shoulder, checking the lock on my door twice, 3 times. I didn't sleep. Every creak in my apartment sounded like a footstep. Every buzz on my phone made my heart jump. I kept thinking, what if he doesn't let it go? Michael wasn't just arrogant, he was careful. And if he felt like a cornered king, I had no doubt he'd strike back, quietly and cruelly. I reread the text messages we'd exchanged, played back the voicemails. Each one was a breadcrumb, pieces of a pattern I didn't want to trust to memory alone. So I compiled it all. Screenshots of Slack messages where he dismissed my concerns, voice recordings from team meetings where he belittled me in front of colleagues, the call where he threatened my reputation, that one I'd saved the moment I hung up. Eliza had already advised me, keep everything, don't assume he'll play by the rules. So I did more than keep it. I submitted it. Late that night, I encrypted the files and sent them directly to Eliza's firm, where they were logged into the official pre-litigation database under my case. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it could become one in a blink. And just in case, I made a second copy, stored in a secure cloud vault under a separate name, shared with only 2 people I trusted completely. The next day, something shifted. It was subtle. At first, a man standing too long by the coffee shop I visited every morning. Another lingering outside the clinic where I'd gotten my medical note, pretending to scroll his phone, but never tapping the screen. By the 3rd time, I saw the same Navy windbreaker near my block, always at a distance, never quite doing anything. I felt it deep in my gut. I was being followed. I didn't know who he was. I didn't have proof. But I knew the feeling. The way your skin tightens when you're not alone, even when you can't see the eyes on you. Michael wouldn't send someone to hurt me. I didn't think. That wasn't his style. But scare me? Absolutely. I filed a preliminary police report. Vague, maybe, but documented. I gave them the times, the descriptions, the pattern. They logged it, gave me a case number. I wasn't overreacting. I was protecting myself. Still, when I got home that night, I bolted every lock on the door and slept with the light on. Because power isn't just exhilarating, it's dangerous. And when you threaten someone who's built their empire on silence and control, You learn just how far they'll go to keep it. The court summons arrived on a Monday. Michael received it by registered mail. Signature required. Eliza sent me a copy of the delivery confirmation. He opened it at 9:42 a.m. in front of his executive assistant and 2 members of his leadership team. By 10:03, he was calling HR. By 10:15, he was storming down the hall, waving the thick packet of documents that detailed every misstep, every clause he violated, and every attempt he made to silence me. I wasn't there to see it, because that morning I was on a train headed north. Not far, just a few hours away, to my friend Laura's place in a quiet town off the coast. She was the first person I called after the 3rd time I felt someone following me. "Come stay with me," she said without hesitation. "You can work from here. Breathe. Just be safe." So I packed a duffel, sent Eliza a quick update, and left my apartment behind. I didn't want to be brave anymore. I wanted to be smart. Laura's house was old and calm, with creaky floorboards and a kettle that whistled like it was from a forgotten century. She cleared out her guest room and let me set up my laptop by the sunniest window. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could exhale. But peace doesn't last when someone like Michael is involved. On Wednesday, a message landed in my inbox. Not from him directly, of course. He wouldn't risk that now. It came through one of the junior associates at Nextbridge. A whisper passed through mutual contacts. He says he's confident that the court will rule in his favor, that no judge will take your claims seriously. Of course he did. Michael didn't believe in fairness. He believed in power, in influence, in the illusion of control. But what he didn't understand was that control is only as strong as the silence that holds it up. And I had shattered that silence. I'd given Eliza everything. Every file, every timestamp, every threat, the contract, the clause, the cover-up, even the quiet manipulation he thought he'd buried in off-the-record meetings. The case was solid, not flashy, not headline-grabbing, but airtight. It would take time. The court process would stretch into months. He'd make noise, drag his feet, try to spin the story. He'd call it a misunderstanding, a disgruntled employee, a petty dispute. Let him. Because for the first time, Michael Grant wasn't writing the narrative. I was. And this time, it wasn't about getting my job back. It was about proving that even the smallest voice, when backed by truth, by courage, by documentation, can take down the loudest one in the room. That evening, I sat on the porch of Laura's house, tea in hand, watching the waves roll in. My phone buzzed with a text from Eliza. He responded, "Denied everything, but we expected that. See you in court." I smiled. Let him deny it, let him posture, let him feel confident. Because I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. It took nearly 8 months. 8 long months of filings, counterclaims, depositions, and lawyers in gray suits, parsing every syllable of every document. Michael tried everything. Delay tactics, character smears, even an absurd countersuit claiming I had sabotaged company morale. But facts don't care about arrogance, and courts don't care about charm. The ruling came in quietly, just a plain envelope dropped into Eliza's inbox on a rainy Tuesday. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff. Wrongful termination. Breach of contract, retaliation, negligence. And then, something even I hadn't expected. The court flagged several of Michael's internal actions as suspicious enough to refer to the Labor Oversight Board. An investigation was opened. 3 weeks later, Michael Grant resigned under pressure. Nextbridge's board issued a public statement. Irregularities in executive conduct. It was sanitized, yes, but I didn't care. Because I knew the truth. And now, everyone else did too. The damages awarded were significant. Eliza called them career-changing. I called them just enough to finally build something of my own. With her help, I filed a new business registration, Verity Systems, a platform built to protect workers' contributions, document every change, and ensure that no one ever lost their seat at the table just because they didn't shout loud enough. And Laura? Well, somewhere between long walks, whispered late-night strategy talks, and mornings spent pouring coffee beside each other, something shifted. One evening, just after the verdict came down, she leaned on the doorframe of the guest room I'd made my temporary home. "So, she said, eyes soft. Are you going back? Back where? To your old apartment, your old life. I looked at her, at the kitchen where she let me cry, the room where she helped me rebuild, the space where I found myself again, not just the strong, sharp worker, but the woman behind all of it. No, I said, stepping closer. I don't think I am. She didn't reply with words. She kissed me. And just like that, something even deeper than justice settled into place. So here's what I'll tell you, if you've read this far. Never confuse silence for weakness. Never confuse being overlooked for being powerless. And if someone tries to break you because they think they can get away with it, don't just survive. Win, rebuild. And when you do, make sure they see your name on the door of the empire you built from the rubble they left behind. I'm Rose. I was fired for being 5 minutes late, and it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me.